Leaving your children a fortune is the ultimate act of love. It is also, potentially, an act of profound destruction. Few topics ignite such a polarized response, pitting the dream of security against the ideal of merit. Powerful, intelligent people build their entire philosophies on both sides of this divide. One side sees a natural right essential for progress. The other sees a cancer on the body of a fair society. Where do you stand? By the end of this, you might find the ground shifting beneath your feet. The argument against inherited wealth often starts with the heir. We all know the stereotype, the trust fund kid, drifting through life without purpose, defined by consumption. But the reality is a far deeper psychological trap. When you never have to struggle, how do you learn who you are? Every success is tainted by the suspicion that it was bought. Every relationship is shadowed by the question of motive. Do they love you or your lifestyle? Do they value your ideas or your access? That is a documented psychological phenomenon. The constant low-grade paranoia erodes the ability to trust. It's a specific kind of loneliness. Researchers talk about sudden wealth syndrome, but inherited wealth is different. It's foundational. It shapes your identity from birth. You learn that your primary role is to be a steward of something you did not create. The pressure is immense. A 2013 study from Boston College's Center on Wealth and Philanthropy surveyed the ultra-rich. The respondents' most common description of their children was that they lacked the drive and ambition to manage the family fortune. They worried the money was a curse. The very thing designed to provide security created a permanent sense of inadequacy. That sounds convincing, but the alternative for most of humanity is anxiety, precarity, and the daily grind. Who wouldn't trade a bit of existential angst for a life free from financial fear? The argument that wealth is a burden often rings hollow to those who worry about next month's rent. There must be an upside, and there is. A very powerful one. The case for generational wealth is a case for long-term thinking. Society runs on two clocks. The first is the clock of the market, quarterly earnings, election cycles, immediate returns. It's fast, efficient, and deeply short-sighted. The second clock is the clock of civilization. It moves in decades and centuries. Generational wealth is the primary fuel for this second clock. The cathedrals of Europe, the universities of the Ivy League, the art collections that fill our museums. These were funded by patient capital, passed down through families with a vision that extended beyond their own lifespan. The Medici family effectively sponsored the Florentine Renaissance. The Rockefeller family's fortune, channeled through its foundation, helped develop the vaccine for yellow fever and funded the Green Revolution that fed 1 billion people. A publicly traded company, accountable to shareholders every 90 days, could never justify such projects. They require a timeline that only a dynasty can afford. This kind of wealth buys both luxury and time. Time to pursue risky scientific research, time to cultivate artistic talent, time to build institutions that become the bedrock of the future. The argument is that these families are operating as society's de facto research and development department. Insulated from the market's manic short-termism, this noble vision of stewardship often looks very different on the ground. For every university endowed, how many fortunes are simply consumed in displays of status that benefit no one? The argument for long-term vision presumes a visionary heir. That seems like a dangerous bet, and it leads to a much darker problem. The problem of fairness. The moment you zoom out from the individual family to society as a whole, the picture changes dramatically. Generational wealth is the primary engine of inequality. It's a feedback loop. Wealth buys the best education, the best healthcare, the best legal advice, and the best political access. That access is then used to create laws that make it easier to protect and pass on that wealth. In the United States, a mechanism called the step-up in basis allows heirs to inherit assets like stocks or real estate without paying capital gains tax on decades of appreciation. It is a multi-billion-dollar annual subsidy for the children of the wealthy. The game is rigged. The numbers are stark. In the US, the top 1% of households hold more wealth than the entire middle class combined. That concentration slows economic growth as money pools at the top instead of circulating. It corrodes social mobility, making the American dream a statistical longshot for those born in the bottom half. And it damages democracy as the concerns of donors outweigh the needs of voters. The problem is one of context. An individual family's laudable desire to provide for their children, when multiplied by thousands, creates a rigid caste system. It's a system built on the accident of birth. The case for unfairness is mathematically brutal. But what is the practical solution? A 100% inheritance tax? The death tax is one of the most unpopular ideas in politics, even among people who will never come close to paying it. The very idea strikes a deep, emotional nerve. Why is that? Because at its core, inheritance is about family. The impulse to work, save, and build something to pass on to your children is one of the most powerful forces in human history. To many, it feels like a fundamental right. It's the economic expression of love. An attempt by the state to sever that link feels like a profound violation. An intrusion into the most private of spheres. Proponents of inheritance argue that economic freedom is essential. It includes the freedom to dispose of your property as you see fit. That includes giving it to your children. They also make a practical argument. A truly confiscatory inheritance tax would likely fail. The ultra-wealthy would simply move their assets to countries with more favorable laws. Or they would spend fortunes on armies of lawyers and accountants to create complex trusts and foundations, hiding their wealth in plain sight. Many would simply choose to spend every last penny in their lifetime. The result could be less investment, less philanthropy, and a weaker economy for everyone. The cure might be worse than the disease. You might capture a fraction of the wealth, but at the cost of crippling the engine that created it. This paints a picture of a loving parent securing their child's future. But what happens when that security becomes an obligation? What happens when the price of the money is your own life's path? The inheritance comes with strings, spoken or unspoken. The expectation to join the family business, the duty to manage the family's reputation, the pressure to live a life that honors the person who built the fortune. This is the dynastic curse. The old proverb says, shirt sleeves to shirt sleeves in 3 generations. The first generation builds the wealth. The second generation squanders it. The saying exists in nearly every culture for a reason. It's a pattern. The Vanderbilts were once the richest family in America. Their patriarch, Cornelius, built a shipping and railroad empire worth the modern equivalent of over $100 billion. Within 2 generations, the family's spectacular mansions were being torn down or sold off to pay debts. They built palaces and lived like kings. They also fought each other in court for decades. The wealth becomes an active character in the family drama. It's a source of conflict, jealousy, and entitlement. It removes the need for cooperation. Siblings who might have supported each other in a normal family become rivals competing for a larger share of the estate. They are managing a legacy that often manages them in return. The money dictates where they live, who they associate with, and what they are allowed to care about. They inherit the assets, but they also inherit the cage. It's a prison with velvet walls. They have every opportunity, and therefore the freedom to do nothing at all. And for many, that is exactly what they do. So what do you think? The fundamental question is where provision tips into distortion. At what point does a parent's love and desire to provide a better life actually begin to inhibit the child's ability to create one for themselves? Is it possible to pass on the resources without passing on the poison? Some of the world's wealthiest people, like Warren Buffett and Bill Gates, have pledged to give away the vast majority of their fortunes. They want to give their children enough to do anything, but not enough to do nothing. Where is that line? If you had the power to secure your children's lives beyond any possible need, what is the moral price of doing so? For them, and for the society they live in? And what is the price of choosing not to? Where do you draw the line between providing a safety net and building a cage?